Hello everybody, welcome to my channel.
Vivien Leigh, born Vivian Mary Hartley, November 5, 1913 to July 8, 1967, was a British actress celebrated for her extraordinary beauty, emotional depth, and unforgettable performances in some of the most iconic roles in film and theatre history. Best known for her Oscar-winning portrayal of Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind, 1939, and Blanche DuBois in A Streetcar Named Desire, 1951. Leigh left an indelible mark on both Hollywood and the British stage. Early life. Vivien Leigh was born in Darjeeling, India, during the British colonial era. She was educated in Europe and showed a passion for acting from a young age. After returning to England, she trained at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art in London. Career highlights. Gone with the Wind, 1939. Leigh's portrayal of the strong-willed Southern belle Scarlett O'Hara earned her international fame and her first Academy Award for Best Actress. She beat out hundreds of American actresses for the part, and her performance remains one of the most iconic in film history. A Streetcar Named Desire, 1951. Playing Blanche DuBois opposite Marlon Brando, Leigh captured the fragile, delusional Southern woman's descent into madness with haunting realism. This role won her a second Academy Award and cemented her as one of the great actresses of her era. Stage career. Leigh was also an accomplished stage actress, particularly in Shakespearean roles. Her theatre work often overshadowed her film career in terms of critical acclaim. She frequently starred alongside her husband, Laurence Olivier, in productions of Hamlet, Macbeth, and Antony and Cleopatra. Personal life and struggles. Vivien Leigh's life was marked by both triumph and tragedy. She married actor Laurence Olivier in 1940, and the couple became one of the most famous and glamorous duos of their time. However, their relationship was strained by professional rivalry and personal issues. Leigh suffered from bipolar disorder, a condition that affected her personal and professional life, causing erratic behavior and leading to several breakdowns. She also battled tuberculosis, which ultimately contributed to her early death at age 53. Legacy. Vivien Leigh's legacy is defined by her luminous screen presence and her fearless commitment to complex roles. Despite her relatively small filmography, just under 20 films, her performances have had lasting cultural impact. She was a pioneer in portraying women of complexity, contradiction, and strength, setting a precedent for generations of actresses. Her personal letters, diaries, and memorabilia continue to be studied and exhibited, offering insight into the life of an artist whose career was as brilliant as it was brief. The depth behind the beauty. Vivien Leigh was often described as one of the most beautiful women of her time, but her artistry went far beyond physical appearance. Her performances were marked by a rare emotional intensity, sharp intelligence, and technical precision. She approached acting with fierce discipline, often immersing herself completely in the psychology of her characters. Her beauty sometimes led critics and producers to underestimate her, but she consistently shattered expectations through bold, layered performances. Face mask. A dual life, stage and screen. While film brought her international stardom, Leigh always considered herself primarily a stage actress. She once said, "I much prefer the stage. It is more real than life." Notable theatre roles: Ophelia and later Gertrude in Hamlet, Cleopatra in Antony and Cleopatra, Lady Macbeth in Macbeth, Sabina in Thornton Wilder's The Skin of Our Teeth. Her performances were known for their clarity and emotional control. While some contemporaries leaned into theatrical grandiosity, Leigh mastered stillness, restraint, and psychological realism, a more modern acting style that influenced generations to come. Red Heart. Love and Turmoil. Vivien and Olivier. Vivien Leigh's relationship with Laurence Olivier is one of the most famous love stories and tragedies in theatrical history. They met in 1936 and fell passionately in love, eventually marrying in 1940. Together, they were a cultural phenomenon, often called the royal couple of the theater. Yet their marriage was tempestuous. Leigh's mental health, Olivier's affairs, and the pressure of fame strained their union. Despite professional triumphs, including co-starring in films like That Hamilton Woman, 1941, the couple divorced in 1960. Olivier later admitted that he was both awed by her brilliance and overwhelmed by the volatility of her illness. Brain mental health and public perception. Leigh's struggle with bipolar disorder, then known as manic depression, was largely hidden from the public during her lifetime. She experienced extreme mood swings, periods of hyperactivity and charisma followed by deep, paralyzing depression. Colleagues recounted her brilliance on stage followed by emotional collapse backstage. She was among the first major public figures whose life was profoundly shaped by an undiagnosed mental illness. Yet she remained professionally active and fiercely committed to her craft for decades, even after being institutionalized several times. Her perseverance in the face of such challenges is increasingly recognized as a powerful part of her legacy. Film projector. A brief but powerful filmography. Though Leigh made only 19 films, each role was chosen with care. Gone with the Wind, 1939, Scarlett O'Hara. Waterloo Bridge, 1940, Myra Lester. That Hamilton Woman, 1941, Emma Hamilton. Caesar and Cleopatra, 1945, Cleopatra. A Streetcar Named Desire, 1951. Blanche DuBois. The Roman Spring of Mrs. Stone, 1961, Karen Stone. Ship of Fools, 1965, Mary Treadwell. Her final film. Each role revealed a different side of Leigh: romantic, regal, vulnerable, broken. She could play strength and fragility within the same breath. Rose. Death and legacy. Vivien Leigh died on July 8, 1967, at age 53. From complications of tuberculosis, a disease she had battled since the 1940s. The lights of London's theatres were dimmed for an hour in her honor. A rare tribute to a performer whose work transcended time and genre. In the years since her death, her reputation has only grown. Biographers, actors, and critics now regard her as one of the greatest actresses of the 20th century. Exhibitions of her personal effects, including a major 2013 BFI&V and a retrospective, have brought new attention to her inner life. Clapperboard. Vivien Leigh today. In today's conversation around mental health, female representation, and the challenges of fame, Vivien Leigh has emerged as a complex modern figure. She was a woman ahead of her time, a perfectionist in an industry that often pigeonholed women, a survivor of illness and stigma, a performer of staggering talent. Actresses like Cate Blanchett, Gillian Anderson, and Nicole Kidman have cited her influence. Her portrayal of Blanche DuBois is still considered a benchmark for actors tackling emotionally intricate roles. The interior actress, technique and preparation. Vivien Leigh was often mistaken for being a natural actress, but in truth, she was highly trained and deeply analytical in her approach. She studied movement, elocution, and psychology with the same precision she brought to learning lines. Her process was internal, rather than rely on outward theatrics. She mined her own emotional experience, long before such techniques were common outside method acting circles. Leigh once said, "I don't know how to act. I only know how to feel." This philosophy made her a kind of precursor to the emotional realism that would define mid-century American cinema, a remarkable feat for an English actress trained in classical theater. In roles like Blanche DuBois, she was not performing madness, she was inhabiting it. Classical building classical roles, modern soul while she was a master of Shakespeare. Leigh never approached her roles with stiff reverence. Her Cleopatra was sensuous and ironic. Her Ophelia was terrified and wide-eyed, not delicate. Critics often noted that she brought modern emotional undercurrents to classical heroines, giving them fresh urgency for contemporary audiences. She was also unafraid of aging on stage. In The Lady of the Camellias, 1951, she played Marguerite Gautier with a worn sensuality that unsettled critics used to seeing her as purely glamorous. Black heart illness and the tragic muse myth after her death, Leigh was often mythologized as a tragic, delicate figure, the real-life Blanche DuBois. This stereotype both honored and obscured her. While she did suffer profoundly from bipolar disorder and tuberculosis, Leigh was also ferociously intelligent, disciplined, and ambitious. She kept working despite hospitalizations and periods of extreme instability. She traveled globally with the Old Vic Company. She starred in over 200 performances of Streetcar on stage before the film adaptation. She read widely and had a wicked sense of humor, something often overlooked in reductive portrayals of her as mad or damaged. Lightbulb a feminist figure in retrospect, though she wouldn't have used the term. Leigh has become a feminist icon in hindsight. She insisted on equal creative input in productions with Laurence Olivier. She portrayed flawed, complex women at a time when female characters were usually idealized. She navigated a male-dominated theater world with skill, savvy, and occasionally subversion. Her Scarlett O'Hara, for instance, was no simpering romantic heroine. Scarlett was selfish, manipulative, shrewd, and utterly unforgettable. Leigh understood that strength and likability were not the same thing. Books critical reassessment and modern legacy. In recent years, there has been a critical reevaluation of Vivien Leigh. Scholars, biographers, notably Hugo Vickers and Kendra Bean, and actresses have emphasized her revolutionary acting style, personal bravery in the face of mental illness, artful manipulation of public image, importance as a transitional figure between classical and modern performance. Her archive, donated to the British Library by her family, revealed a treasure trove of letters, scripts, and diaries. These documents show a woman with a deep intellectual life, a voracious reader, keen observer of politics, and passionate diarist. Fire the eternal flame. Though Leigh died in 1967, her legacy remains alive across media. Gone with the Wind continues to spark debate and admiration. A Streetcar Named Desire is still a blueprint for how to portray vulnerability on screen. Her influence is seen in actresses like Cate Blanchett, Helena Bonham Carter, and Vanessa Kirby. Modern discussions around mental health in the arts often cite Leigh as a historical touchstone, a reminder of how brilliance and suffering often coexisted silently in the golden age of cinema. She has been portrayed on stage herself, notably in Orson's Shadow and Vivian, a solo play about her last years. Checkered Flag. Final reflections. Vivien Leigh is not merely a film legend. She is a symbol of contradiction and courage, a woman with a delicate face and iron will. An actress who embraced emotional truth when it was unfashionable to do so. A performer whose soul seems to live just behind her eyes on screen. As Laurence Olivier said after her death, she was a tigress. She was a combination of beauty and brilliance and a sadness that never left her eyes. Vivien Leigh's philosophy of art and acting. Though she rarely gave in-depth interviews, Leigh left behind enough writings and remarks to piece together a profound philosophy of acting. She believed in the emotional truth of a performance, but also in its technical rigor. Her performances often balanced deep vulnerability with disciplined control. "One is just as good as the parts one gets," she once said. A deceptively simple statement that reveals her awareness of the structural limitations placed on women in the film and theater industry. She sought roles that challenged the audience's sympathy, roles like Scarlett O'Hara, Blanche DuBois, and Lady Macbeth, characters who weren't virtuous but were vivid, complex, and unforgettable. Leigh didn't belong to any formal acting school, but she practiced a kind of early psychological realism, rooted in deep character study. She often worked with directors on costuming, lighting, posture, gesture, fully understanding how cinema could communicate meaning without words. Dove life after Olivier. Though her 20-year relationship with Laurence Olivier defined much of her public identity, Vivien Leigh had a rich life beyond their split in 1960. She began a long-term relationship with actor Jack Merivale, a kind and supportive man who helped care for her during the difficult final decade of her life. Unlike Olivier, Merivale did not try to save her or compete with her professionally. He offered quiet companionship and emotional stability. Leigh and Olivier remained respectful but distant after their divorce. Olivier later married actress Joan Plowright, but he never denied Leigh's genius, even when speaking of their troubles. Stethoscope. The last years, 1960 to 1967, after the split from Olivier and several hospitalizations, many assumed Leigh would fade from public life. Instead, she entered a remarkable late phase of her career. Tovarich, 1963, she won a Tony Award for Best Actress in a Musical, proving she still had theatrical strength. The Roman Spring of Mrs. Stone, 1961, her aging actress falling for a young gigolo showcased rare vulnerability and mirrored her own insecurities. Ship of Fools, 1965, her final film role, playing a bitter divorcee, remains haunting. Critics praised her mix of rancor and regret, reading it as both performance and confession. Privately, Leigh was in and out of sanatoriums, battling bipolar episodes and suffering recurring bouts of tuberculosis, which would ultimately kill her. She died at her London flat on July 8, 1967, at the age of 53. Laurence Olivier, though gravely ill himself, rushed to her bedside in her final hours, a poetic final moment in one of the most complex love stories in show business history. Candle myth, memory, and afterlife in death. Vivien Leigh became mythologized, often reduced to the beautiful but broken actress, the real-life Blanche DuBois. But this romanticization flattens her. The real Vivien Leigh was witty and well-read, a fan of Dickens, Tolstoy, and Proust, politically aware, advocating for refugee relief during World War II, a perfectionist, often rewriting dialogue or critiquing lighting setups, unashamed of her sexuality, even in an era of female repression, stubborn and self-critical, yet never self-pitying her belongings. Letters, diaries, annotated scripts reveal a woman who lived passionately and suffered quietly. She never used her illness as an excuse. She kept working, kept traveling, kept hoping for better roles. Classical building cultural legacy. Vivien Leigh remains a paradox, a performer remembered more for two roles, Scarlett and Blanche, than her full career. And yet those two roles helped redefine what women could be on screen. Legacy highlights: 2 Academy Awards. 2 of the most intense performances ever put on film. A Tony Award in her later years. Posthumous retrospectives by the BFI, V&A Museum, and British Library. Influence on generations of actresses and directors.
Bye bye. Thanks for watching.